OptiFlow or the OptiFlow series. Today we will be talking to Scott Campbell from the Dallas Cowboys, who's a great OptiFlow user, and anxious to hear his stories and learn from his experience. I'm Ben Coffey. I'll be doing some of the training stuff today and just running over some of the OptiFlow content. And I have with me Ben Slick. Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
And Chris Manchuk is on the line as well, one of our co-founders and VP of Sales. Chris, you want to say hello? Oh.
Good morning, everybody. I'll be manning the QA today, so any questions, fire them my way.
So Chris is on the horn answering questions. You have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions about any of the content we're covering or anything HydroPoint related, Chris is well positioned to answer those questions. Anything that he doesn't answer will get customer service to follow up on your questions within the next 48 hours. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Scott Campbell, who is the Dallas Cowboys landscape manager. Is that your title, or is it the site manager?
It's a weird title. It's landscape and field manager. And really, I'm just wearing whatever hat they tell me to wear this day. Next day, the day after that, everybody's just, pulled in a ton of directions here. So if there's glare, let me know. This is actually, the bowl is actually the quietest place in the building today, believe it or not. We've got so much going on around the property. So if I need to change the angle or anything, just let me know.
Let me just say that I've had people log into this webinar with fake backdrops that weren't as good as the one that you have right now. So thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead.
Just because you wear a lot of hats, don't let Chris Manchuk send you something from the Patriots. He's got the
Oh, that's a hat you don't have to worry about me putting on.
All right, so we are going to jump into OptiFlow content. I'm going to share my screen here real fast. Bring this up, sorry. We had, already introduced Scott Campbell. I have to say that I made your title slide and I used my favorite picture from WeatherTRAK.net. I love coming across this on my WeatherTRAK.net account because I feel like I'm on Monday Night Football. So I love that. Today we're going to talk about advanced flow management. So like I said, this is the third in a series of discussions about OptiFlow. And this isn't really designed for OptiFlow users, but just general WeatherTRAK users and irrigation nerds who might be listening. We've done a three-part series on the OptiFlow solution. First in the series, we talked about how the optimization happens and the optimization feature, how we use the capacity of your main line to shorten your irrigation program. And so part one, we covered that. Last week, we covered the programming details, how we get all that information into the system so it can perform OptiFlow functions without exceeding mainline or source limit. Saving this last, most advanced topic for this week, how OptiFlow is a solution that allows us to monitor flow across multiple points of connection and multiple controllers. And I love this part of the solution because it opens up the capability of flow monitoring for a lot of our WeatherTRAK users that may not historically have been compatible with flow monitoring. And so we'll talk about kind of what a system looks like that is now compatible. To do that, we want to cover the difference between basic and advanced flow management. When we first started monitoring flow back in the Pro 2 days, we're capable of what we call basic flow management, which means if you have one point of connection and one controller, we can go ahead and put a flow sensor on there and start to watch the gallons. We really liked that. We saw the value in that. So when we upgraded to Pro 3, we added the functionality where we could start to listen to multiple flow sensors and start dealing with more advanced hydraulic conditions like looped main lines and multiple source systems. But we found that that still didn't get us to where we wanted to be. We want to be able to monitor flow on any irrigation system that is running WeatherTRAK. And that's where OptiFlow steps in. Now, the OptiFlow, we're able to manage flow across as many as 30 controllers at once, 40 points of connection. It really just blows the doors off of the configurations that are an application match. And the Dallas Cowboys are a great example of this. This is the demo that we'll use today is their system. We'll show you how they mixed and matched all along the way, building that system that made it a flow challenge, made it a configuration that made it challenging to manage flow. So this is what it looks like, right? We took this out of the book that says that basically, as long as you have a system where we can put a flow sensor on every point of connection and run that back to a controller, we can start to track those gallons and manage the flow. Not only protect you from mainline breaks and station breaks, but really see how many gallons you're using on any given night and manage that in a most effective way. So when you do that, you add flow to an advanced system configuration. Last week, we talked about all of the challenges of the hydraulics, getting the hydraulics programmed in. So not only are we tracking that, we want to add to that this week the additional value of having multiple points of connection or controllers that OptiFlow can manage in looped main lines or shared mainline configurations. And when we do that, we just inherently come across some challenges. We want to talk about the challenges that we face both with manual irrigation and scheduled irrigation. First, with manual irrigation, it's just a logistical challenge to manage multiple devices across your irrigation system. So when you add flow monitoring, you'll add a master valve and flow sensor like this one. And if you add a master valve, that master valve has to be open for irrigation to happen. So if I wanted to operate a station valve on controller B, I need to have a system that knows to turn on the master valve on controller A and the station valve on controller B to get water to come out of the heads that I want it to. And doing this manually is almost impossible. Doing it with OptiFlow is simple. You just program it in, and anytime you try and prompt manual irrigation, the OptiFlow system knows all of the components that need to activate to deliver water where you want it. So it takes something that was super challenging, almost impossible, and makes it very easy, seamless to the folks that are using it out in the field. And then last but not least, we want to talk about the challenge of scheduling irrigation through OptiFlow, right? By having multiple controllers, we want to orchestrate all of those controllers to work together to deliver an optimized irrigation schedule. So the way that that works is each night, all of your controllers will continue to monitor WeatherTRAK information. It'll track each station's depletion and identify which stations need to irrigate that night and which ones don't. We deliver that up into the cloud. And then in the cloud, OptiFlow creates a site-based irrigation schedule, right? So we take all of the station values, overlay that onto all of the constraints of the piping infrastructure, and then create an irrigation schedule for the entire site. And then we download that to each controller individually. And when we download the instructions, it's not just a run order like classic WeatherTRAK or classic irrigation. It's a very specific set of instructions that will allow each controller to run as many as 8 stations at once, and we'll know the exact minute and second each station should begin and end to optimize the irrigation across all of your controllers and all of your components, and making sure that all of that fits into the restricted schedules that we want. So long story short, what we're trying to do with OptiFlow is provide a solution that allows your system to work together to use the capacity of your mainline, the capacity of your design, and seamlessly add features that make it easy to manage. Now, for our last demos, we have been using simple systems, one point of connection, one controller system. And I thought for this conversation, it would be very interesting to jump into the other end of the pool, which is what the Cowboys have for us, right? The Cowboys are running a site out there that I believe you have 17 WeatherTRAK controllers, 7 of which are OptiFlow, right? So we're going to really focus in on mostly the 7 controllers that operate that main loop that you're managing. Is that right, Scott?
Correct. Yeah. So the main loop around what we refer to as the postage stamp, which is our building and the parking lots that surround it, we've got 7 controllers on that looped main. That's anywhere. It varies from 3 to 4 inches. I wouldn't hear for construction of the system or design. I've recently come to learn the old adage of a pound or an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure is definitely the case. So we've been given a set of circumstances to, and I've given you guys a set of circumstances to help me manage. That's been a challenge at times, but I think the solution that we've come up with by far beats what we had prior to that, using some different manufacturers to manage that.
So Scott, can you give us a little bit of background just so the people know? We've talked about it a bunch, but tell us how you came across, let me say this, most professionally designed systems aren't going to offer the same kind of challenges that the ones that we manage out on your site have, right? Can you tell us how we came across a system with so many odds and ends and unique challenges?
Well, if you want the honest truth about it, I'll give it to you. And I actually reached out to our contractor, our supplier, Ewing Irrigation, and I told my rep, this is what I'm trying to do. What I have doesn't work, and it's bad. What do you have for me? And he's like, well, I'm not sure. I've got a few different things. Let me come out and peek at it. And so he did, and he said, well, these guys are on the forefront of technology when it comes to irrigation control and have the cellular capabilities. And that was one of the things, that was one of the major driving factors for me, was that the controllers had a cellular driven communication system. We do have Wi-Fi, but it's really inconsistent on some of our outer lots. And I wanted everything to communicate together, have a central point that I could control all the different areas. Some of our lots are almost a mile away. So that was a big factor for me. And then when you introduced the OptiFlow into it, it really became, the bee's knees, so to speak. It really became much more beneficial than I even envisioned it being. The flow control was really where I started to really put our old system in the rearview mirror.
So maybe describe a couple of the challenges that you were faced with and that got solved as a result of changing your control architecture.
Okay, so the biggest problem that we have is with the loop mainline itself. Like I said, going from 3 to 4 inches, well, if we have a mainline break, or we have just a valve malfunction and we've got to replace the valve, or we got to do something there, they didn't have the forethought of putting in, certain isolation valves or other things. We didn't even have master valves. But when I would have to drain the main line in order to work on certain portions of the system, it was taking me upwards of 8 hours to drain out the main line. And I needed a way to shorten that because I couldn't afford to have the system down that long. A lot of our events take place back to back to back, and I've got to be able to do it quickly. And the OptiFlow gave me a lot more information to help me pinpoint that and where I needed to go and how I could speed up that drain process. But that was the looped mainline is really what pushed me to go forward with WeatherTRAK system and get that shored up. Because when we have a catastrophic break, which we've had out here, I'm pumping upwards of 600 gallons a minute out into a public space, whether it's on our property or pumps out into a road. I flooded a road one night at about 12:30 at the end of a concert, and that was, that's disastrous. So I needed something to solve those types of issues.
And another thing I love about just talking to you, Scott, about your site is exactly that, the number of challenges that just the high traffic of that site poses for you, and all the reaction time and all the different things that you manage to keep all of your people happy and all of your plants happy at the same time.
Absolutely. That's the second component of this system that's been really beneficial, is with OptiFlow and my ridiculously short water windows from time to time. OptiFlow has really helped shrink that down. We had previously, a 10-hour water window for roughly 11 acres, and at times I've shrunk it all the way down to 4 to 5 hours. I think it was like 4 hours and 40 minutes as we were able to shrink it down with the OptiFlow. And, for some folks, that's not necessarily a big deal. But if you're working with common areas, you're working with high traffic areas, lots of events, that becomes a real game changer when you can get in and get out with your water needs and it not affect ingress or egress or public safety in any form or fashion.
I love it. Now, for my irrigation nerds that are watching out there, is it all right if I show them your system? Can we take a
Oh,
seat?
absolutely. Yeah, please do.
So I'm gonna just show real quick, go through, we've in previous episodes, we have covered both the program page, or what we call the configure page for OptiFlow, and the optimize page. And so I want to just real quickly show all the work that's gone into programming, and then show you the performance of AT&T Stadium, what it looks like on OptiFlow. So you can see in here, we talked about how we set up the hydraulic tree, and for this site, it was a pretty basic setup. We just set up one looped main line and assigned all of the stations to that main line. There wasn't a whole lot of necessary detail in breaking it off in the sub mains and subsectioning. We're finding success by just managing that whole main line to 600 gallons a minute all at once. And we can, if we drill into this, we can see that on this main line, we've got 6 different points of connection from 5 different controllers and 7 controllers that share that information. So it really is an advanced setup that when you start to put it in OptiFlow, becomes pretty simple to see and understand and manage. Scott, does that, anything to build on that?
The real challenge that we faced was with flow and the 6 points of connection, because we do have some elevation change here, even though we're, pancake flat Texas. We, when the building was constructed, obviously we had to excavate out. I'm actually sitting about 60 feet underground right now. And then if you go to our highest point, we're considerably higher. And so the challenge of managing the points of connection and what their perceived failures are was really the challenge that we've continued to kind of tweak over the past year and a half, is what is a true break, and having to set those levels, because when we've got optimization on, say, the northeast portion of the property where it's a little bit lower, well, the point of connection on the southwest corner, which is the highest, is making up for that. So to maintain that flow, and I would get some false alarms from time to time, but through tweaking it and being able to see what I was doing and see what the meter was actually doing, see what the master valve was actually doing, gave me a lot more information to then go and tweak that to make it a better output and a more accurate output of what is realistically happening in real time.
I love that. And that is that's one of my favorite parts of the story, is how both your team and our team worked so hard at overcoming those challenges, right? When we first installed, we saw that there were places where the software didn't do what you needed to do, and we actually built a demo version of AT&T Stadium's controller configuration in our corporate office to continue and solve those problems and test the solutions before we rolled them out to you. And you were a great partner, and we appreciate all of your work and patience in that process, for sure.
Well, no, I mean, it's been a huge help, and I know I gave you guys some pretty weird parameters, like y'all can only, figure this out between March 1st and August 1st, because every other time I'm too busy to deal with it. So y'all worked with me as much as I worked with y'all, and that was a huge help, is having a partner in order to get these things solved, hopefully be beneficial to a lot of your other clients, but ultimately solve the conundrum that we were faced with on a season by season basis.
And for those of you keeping track at home, those features are now what we call multi-manager, that is being rolled out to a lot of our OptiFlow sites. So yes, absolutely, it is helping all of us, for sure. So I want to jump back real quick. Before I do, I want to encourage all of our participants to use the Q&A box. Get those questions rolling in for both Scott and Chris Manchuk. If you guys have questions, we'd love to hear them. While you do that, I'm going to bounce back over to the demo and show what I think is the coolest part of the site and the demonstration, and that happens on the Optimize page. If you can zoom in on this, let me try and blow this up as much as I can. You can see that Scott has his system set up to a 650 gallon per minute capacity, but a 600 gallon per minute optimization, right? So we can use as much as 650, but we optimize to 600. And that it's impressive to go through. If you look at any one of these 5-minute windows, you can see as many as 7 different controllers pulling their irrigation from this main line, and you can see which controllers and which stations are activated to keep that main line running at its capacity. In addition, we can go through here and see individual programs. We can check out and see how the irrigation system is actually going to perform tonight, and see which programs will run when. And if we don't like what we're seeing here, we can go in and change any of this stuff from the dynamic programming environment. I can change water windows, I can change start times, and then just re-optimize to see if the changes that I make achieve the desired effect. Scott, don't worry, I'm not going to save any of this. This is just playing with it. I will not hit save.
Don't worry, I'm going to go in and I've got projects going on outside. I'm going to go in and jack with it today anyway.
Awesome. So do you use these tools, Scott? How do you use these tools in your daily workflow? So,
I've got the optimization pretty well where I want it. And feel free to bring that screen up again. I might have you pointed a couple of things for me. I've got the optimization pretty much where I want it. I've got the window right now. I've got the window set a little bit larger because we just don't have any events going on. We're starting to green up. But I also have some projects going on. So I'm pulling things on and off of there. I'm moving things out of auto into user no ET. I've got a few things in user ET. I'm trying to utilize a lot of the different things, almost as if I'm just managing one controller by itself, irrespective of the other ones. That's one of the luxuries of this, is that I can do that. But one of the things that I use this most for, this particular page, is if you were to look at the overall optimization window, I might go in, I might get an alert on my phone or an email saying something that I had a mainline break. Okay, well, I know it didn't have a mainline break. Security would have called me and let me know that I was flooding the place out. So I can go back in and I can come in the next day and I can click on one of those bars and say, okay, this is when I got the alert. So I can now go and I can send guys to each one of those individual controllers and say, run these zones independently. Let's see if we have a large lateral break. And it's shortened my window for repair, because now I've got guys across the property looking at individual things to see where the potential, alert came from and fix it right there on the spot. And so my repair times have shrunk down beyond a considerable amount. I mean, just light years faster than what we were once able to do. Even before, when we just had the XR controllers, with the OptiFlow, going to the OptiFlow, it shrunk that down to virtually the day after things are repaired. So I've got a system that runs a lot more efficiently. I waste less water than I ever have.
That's great. Chris, do you have any questions coming across the Q&A box? Oh, you're on mute.
A couple questions right here. Scott, the first question here is asking about the master valves that you are using there, if they're normally open or normally closed, and why you chose one versus the other.
Oh, I would almost think that Ed Hotnett was on the line, since he and we wrestled with this one. So we had an event here called Caboo, and Caboo was a property-wide festival, and we had just installed the hydrometers that you guys provided for us, and we chose normally closed. And Caboo came to us, said, hey, we need to use some of your irrigation system for our comfort stations, portable bathrooms. And so we said, no problem. We hooked it up that way, and all of a sudden the system is locking down, because these portable bathrooms are not playing nice with normally closed master valves. And so we came back in and we replumbed them and changed them over to normally open for those types of situations.
Well, that is a very, very good answer, very specific answer on that choice. I'm not sure everyone's going to have that situation, but thank you for that answer. Another question here related to the elevation that you noted earlier, Scott. If your field is 60 feet below street level, where is your water source, and what's the pump elevation if there's a pump involved?
Well, the city of Arlington has been really great, first and foremost. So that they supply the water, and we do not need a pump. They've got enough pressure coming out of their city mains that I've never ever wanted for a pump. But we actually do have a portion of our property that is dedicated to building water supply, cooling towers, pump stations. But we don't tap into that at all because we've got adequate pressure. In some of my areas, I'm putting almost 70 PSI at the head when with 10 or 12 zones running. So great. I don't ever worry for that. But realistically, the overall change in elevation isn't more than 30 to 40 feet from the high end of the property to the low end. I'm just sitting down in the pit in the middle.
Got it. And then one last question. You noted earlier, Scott, that you're doing some tweaking when you're getting some alerts to make sure you could fine tune it. Couple questions here is one, and maybe Ben Coffey, it's a question for you too. Does OptiFlow allow you to do station level tweaking versus program level? And then two, how did you know they were not real alerts? And how are you, troubleshooting or doing cause and effect on that?
Well, Ben, if you don't mind, I'll step in here because I recently ran into it. Well, one of the ways that I know is because when you originally do the learn function on OptiFlow, we had our system pretty well in tune, and I had those quantities for each station. Now, if I want to go in and change those, I do have the capability to change those. So like if I change precipitation rate on a zone by switching out to a larger nozzle, I can do that. But then I go back and I'll hit the relearn button, and I'll relearn that flow amount for that zone based on the increased nozzle size. So I've utilized it for that. And the reason I say that I have a good sense of it being a false alert is it really just comes from just a day-to-day knowledge of the system, knowing what its capabilities are, and knowing that main line, if we do have a problem with it, it's 99.9% a catastrophic failure, just because the volume and the pressure coming into it.
Great.
That's awesome. And to build on that, the only thing that I would say is, in my experience, it's good to know the difference between actual flow and measured flow. Know what the controller is measuring, and use that information, right? It doesn't always necessarily, in an alert situation, it always doesn't necessarily spell out the same alert, but you know the numbers that WeatherTRAK is delivering are exactly what it measured. And so to use that as a guidepost and say, all right, we measured a high flow alert, now let's boil it down and figure out where that happened, is a great place to start.
So I guess it really all comes down to analyzing the data, and all the data is there at your fingertips to be able to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, Scott, last but not least, I always ask our guests, what does WeatherTRAK save you?
Well, I heard you ask some of the other guys this question, and my answer is probably a little bit different, because saving water isn't our priority here. It really isn't. We have an ownership group that demands things look a certain way for Monday Night Football, like you said, but they demand a high level of performance. And the ability to deliver that high level of performance and the high level of efficiency is really what WeatherTRAK has provided, by going to this OptiFlow system and making all these wild changes that I've asked you guys to make, just to please the network TVs or any number of groups that have input into what this place looks like. And that's, I say that, but I actually went and looked at the numbers, and I actually am saving a lot of water. I'm saving almost 20% based over what we were doing 5 years ago. So yes, the water savings are there, but our utility bills are so stinking high. What's a few $1,000?
Fantastic management. Way to go. All right. Well, that brings us back to the PowerPoint. We go here and we wrapping up here and getting ready for, we already did the Cowboys demo. Any questions that you have, we always want to reiterate, we're here to support you throughout. We've got the customer support team both at the email address and the phone number listed here. We also have online training resources and support resources both at hydropoint.com and at hydropoint.learnupon.com, where you'll find free on-demand certified training. Look forward to seeing you next week, where we will have Danny Smith, a great water manager from California, and we'll be talking about choosing the correct WeatherTRAK flow sensor for your project. There's a lot that goes into understanding the nuances of selecting a flow sensor, and we'll get into some of the dirty details about that with Danny Smith, who is the Director of Water Management from Park West. So look forward to seeing you again there, and thanks for tuning in. That's all I've got. Chris, you want to say goodbye?
Scott, thank you so much. Great job. Pleasure doing business with you. Appreciate all your help and support, and looking forward to many more years serving you in the organization there. So thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining us.
I'll piggyback on that and say thanks for your continued feedback and support. Thanks for making us better to help you do your job more efficiently. You're making us stronger in the result. Thanks.
And
well,
Scott?
I'm glad I could provide it. Guys, I really do appreciate the relationship that we've formed over the past couple of years, and the willingness to work with me. I know I've asked a lot of you guys, and I certainly appreciate it, and hopefully know that y'all can ask the same in return. But no, thank y'all for putting this on and hopefully helping some other guys out there who have some wheels spinning and they're looking for solutions. You guys are proving that y'all are the solution, you know, in all those cases. So I appreciate it, and I hope y'all all have a great week.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, Scott.
Let's hope we have football this year too.
We'll have it.
Right on. That's a good
Andy
answer.
Dalton behind you? Take care.
Bye-bye,
Thanks so much,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.